Good morning. I didn't realize this table was going to be like up to our chins. Sorry about that. Jarvis, I'm going to make an executive decision and I'm going to move this out of the way. I kind of need it. You need it? Okay. I'm not going to move it. She's in charge today. Hey, good morning, everybody. So, like Katie said, we're doing things a little differently now, or not now, as in continuing, but for this series. And I think it's been good so far. Like, I know you don't necessarily enjoy these conversations per se, but man, is it helpful. And in light of that, I just wanted to give a big thank you to Bill and Diane Fowler for that story last week. Powerful, powerful story. It takes a lot to share that kind of part of your story, and I know they do it because they know it's going to help a lot of people. So we appreciate you guys sharing that last week. So this morning, let's see. Let me get on my notes here before I lose my mind. Katie already stole like she always does that. She steals what I'm going to say and how I'm going to start.
I don't know why you let her talk before you, man.
Sorry, that was my introduction, reminding you to say thank you to Bill
Katie.
and Diane. So, okay, here we go. I'm going to get on track here. Anytime we get together, things kind of go awry.
We need beer.
We need beer, yeah. That would be way better. So, just again, a reminder, we talked about paying attention to the pain in week 1, and then Bill talked about ruthless trust. I love that word from Brennan Manning, the ruthless trust of God. Bill talked about that author a little bit last week, and he introduced me to that author, and it just totally messed me up in a wonderful way. So we recommend him. And then today, we're talking about the birth of something new. And so, to me, it's interesting to talk about that in light of grief and loss. But let me start by showing you this verse of Scripture. This is one verse of Scripture I want to share with you before we jump in. This is Jesus talking about his death that's coming. He said, "Very truly I tell you, unless a kernel of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains only a single seed. But if it dies, it produces many seeds." In other words, he was alluding to the fact that, yes, he was going to give his life, he was going to die, but out of that, the resurrection was coming, and out of that was going to become life for the whole world. And so, having said that, it's when you talk about the new thing, when you're talking about grief and loss, there can be an immediate tension around this idea of something new, because I think there's a fear that in order to have something new and good out of it, that you might have to forget. Like the person you've lost, you might have to forget that person or forget the thing, move on. People will say that to you, it's time to move on. And so when all you have left is a memory, whether you're talking about a person or something else that you've lost, moving on can feel like forgetting. And so that is why I have Liz Paris Segura. Y'all say hi. Know her, but some of you may not know her because Liz has better personal idea and thought than I do at this point. And so I've asked her to join me, and I'm going to ask her some questions in order to let her tell her story of this idea of something new being birthed out of the past. And just a quick introduction, she's one of my best friends. She's second in line to her husband, JD, who we're going to talk about a little bit. But I'll set up the story, and then I'm going to let her tell it. Liz is a widow. And I know you look at her and you're like, she's too young. Yes, absolutely. That's kind of the point. She's too young. Liz lost her first husband, Micah, to brain cancer. And you were 24?
I was 28.
28, sorry.
I was 28. He was 29.
He was 29, okay. So she was a little older than I remember, but still way too young to go through that. So, Liz, we're just going to jump right in. I'm going to stop talking and just ask questions. Tell us a little bit about yourself, just kind of setting up the story of how you got to here today.
So, like you said, like we said, I was 28 years old and Micah was 29 when he died. I was 24. This is where that number's coming from. I was 24 years old and he was 25 when they found the cancer. And Micah was diagnosed with a type of brain cancer that is not curable at this time. It's always fatal. And we had 4.5 years from the point of diagnosis until he died at home with me. And that was in 2013. So I've had, it was at the end of 2013. I've had a couple of years to get to where I am now. And that's, I think, kind of the story that we're talking about today is what was that? How did I get here?
Yeah, so I know this is a dumb question, but I'm asking it because I want to hear you talk about the answer. Would you say that you're done grieving the loss of Micah?
So I, years ago, developed an answer to that question, and I realize that it's a bit sarcastic, but I'm going to say it anyways.
Good.
Like, is he alive again?
Right.
Is he back?
Yeah.
Because if he's not, then no. His name was Micah Alexander Paris, and I miss him. And I miss the way he smelled. I miss the way he told terrible jokes. I miss the way he looked. I miss the way he was thoughtful about our friends. I miss the way he had a heart for the poor, because he grew up really, really, really poor, hungry, without appropriate housing a lot, and I am very. My twin sister and my in-law are over there, and of course they loved him very much as well. So I would not say that you stop grieving. I would not say that you stop grieving. I don't think that you stop grieving. I do want to say, I hope I'm not getting ahead when I say this.
You're good.
So Katie, when Katie was doing her excellent intro, you did say that way better than Scotty could have. When Katie was doing her excellent intro, she said this thing about we're in week 3 of grief. And man, that really struck me because it was like, man, what was week 3 like? What was it like 3 weeks? Do I remember the 3-week mark? And then, because I'm probably more in like week 300 at this point. But I don't really remember week 3, but what I can tell you is week 300 is not the same as week 3. And I think that's what people are looking for when they want, is it over with? Is it done? Have you moved on? It doesn't, no, you never stop grieving, but you don't grieve the same forever.
That's good. So how does this affect your relationship with JD? So JD is her husband now. Micah is
Yes.
the husband she lost.
So-
just to clarify.
This is my husband, the dude in the hat over here, John Segura, who absolutely does not want to be in any way the center of attention here. So it affected it it affected it because it has to. I had somebody ask me one time, what's your advice for somebody that's dating a widow? And I don't. It's hard. It's complicated. We are bearing a weight that you are not used to. And I guess more than how did it affect my relationship with JD, I kind of want to tell you how it is that JD managed to, because I assure you, like, I had nothing left to prove at that point. Like, it was one silly thing, one bad date. It would have been like, nope, I don't care. Toodles, have a nice life. I'm moving on. I have no interest in making emotional attachments to people. JD's dad passed away the morning of his 11th birthday, and his mom was just a little bit older than me when she was widowed. And so this was a man who understood grief, and that mattered in all of this. It mattered because JD looked at me and very, very plainly said almost these exact words early on. He said, I will never, ever ask you to take his picture off the wall. What I'm asking is there room for my picture on the wall? That was a good line, right?
Was
Didn't
that
he-
your pickup line? No. No, that's, sorry. When I start getting tense, I got to crack a joke
Yeah.
or do something to break the tension. But
It was a good line. He's
that was
cute
incredible.
too, right?
He's an amazing chef too. He can cook really well.
Yeah, no kidding, dude. But so JD and I got together. I wasn't really willing to call it dating until quite a few months after Micah died, but we've known each other for years. We've known each other basically since we were all in high school together. And JD was first in my life as a comfort, as a friend, being present through all of this. And it affected our relationship because he watched me cry a lot. And are you familiar with the widow's nightmare? Do you know what the widow's nightmare is? Oh, good. You guys are going to hate this. So the widow's nightmare, and if you don't know, great, good for you. I hope you never know. The widow's nightmare is when you have the dream that they are alive. You have the dream, and they come to you, and in the dream they're alive, and they look at you, and you say, and you look at them and you say, this can't be, you died, you can't be here. And they go, nope, you had a bad dream. I didn't really die. I was sick or whatever, but it was all a dream. That was the fake world. This is reality. I'm really alive. It's okay. You can be relieved now. And you feel exactly the way you imagine you would feel if all of a sudden they were alive again, and then you wake up and you lose them again.
Wow.
And when I would have these dreams, it would get really hard to wake up from them. And so I would say the first year that we were together, part of our relationship was JD watching me sleep and waiting to see if I was doing that thing, and he would wake me up a lot of nights. It affected our relationship because I think it put JD in a position to care not only about me, but to care about my grief. And to have a lot of patience. I mean, he would have had to have a lot of patience anyways. So that's what's up.
So, is there the urge or temptation to compare JD to Micah? And how do you navigate that part? How I've heard you describe Micah, I didn't know Micah. Like, it seems to me like him and JD are like completely different.
Yep.
So I don't know if there is a tendency, if that's better or worse. How does that look for y'all?
Look, I'll be honest with you, man. Micah was a wonderful man and a buffoon. Which there's like 4 of you in this room that knew him, and like he was a wonderful man and a boob. And JD is a very different person. But no, you don't set out to compare, if that's something you're wondering. You don't set out, but you do in the way of, like, have you ever moved to a new house and you think, oh, this is different because my old house had this, and
Right.
It's not necessarily, it's different, but there isn't really a comparison. And it just takes time to square with it. And my advice now, if I'm giving anybody advice, is the same as what I told myself then, which is be as gently honest as you can about all of it. If there was something, I would tell JD sometimes, like, oh, that's really interesting. Like, Micah would have always done this, and you do it this way. And maybe it's not good, bad, or indifferent. Like, maybe it's just an observation. It happens. But we also had a lot of conversation. I'm not trying to go into couples therapy here with all this, I'm sorry. Like, full disclosure, I'm also a clinician, so if I start going down the rabbit hole, somebody wave. It was about being very honest and very communicative, and making sure that he didn't feel pigeonholed, making sure that he didn't feel JD was never supposed to be Micah. And he wasn't. And I you can love more than one thing. And that's what it was very much with JD. He's very different from Micah, but I love him very much as well.
So was there ever times, is there ever time that you're afraid of forgetting Micah?
No. No. And it's interesting. It's a valid question from an outside perspective, but in my head, that's absurd.
Gotcha.
It's kind of like, are you ever afraid you're going to wake up and forget what your favorite color is? Are you ever afraid you're going to wake up and forget what you look like? Are you ever going to wake up and forget how to get out of the bed? Like, I mean, short of traumatic brain injury, like, no, I don't. Not only Micah, but his loss is such an ingrained part of who I am. I mean, you ever been married? How much of that person becomes a part of you? How much do you grow with that person? How much do you become a part of that person? I would no more forget him than I would forget who I am.
That's good. So that leads to the next question really well. Did people who knew you with Micah, like y'all as a couple, were there friends or circle of friends or people in your life that knew y'all together that struggled to embrace now you and JD, or you as a widow after that?
There were one or two people who didn't like JD being with me, and I would take that as people who just didn't know him. Our actual group, first of all, you need to understand, a catastrophic loss in your life results in a culling of sense, okay? People lie with the best of intentions. And that idea of, I'll really be there for you if something goes wrong, no, they won't. And when all of your friends are in their 20s and the thing that's gone wrong is brain cancer, people run. They head for the hills because that's just scary as heck, isn't it? And so now there was a lot of people who went to the funeral and a lot of people who wanted to be a part of those things. But in terms of the days when things were ugly, when things were hard, like maybe a tenth of the crowd showed up. And those are the people that are still with me today. Kate, Kyle, Claire Bear, Haley, who runs 10 Mile Productions, who is really good friends with Micah and was there for some of the hardest days. I'm sure there's people that I'm forgetting, but and those people didn't. Those people lost him too. Those people watched me grieve too. Those people could see the difference, and they did not have any problem with it because why would they?
So you said something to me a few days ago. You said one of the things you want people to recognize when you've, especially when you've lost a spouse, is that you want them to recognize and understand in the sense that you died.
Yeah.
And that tell me what you mean by that.
That's right.
You're fine.
Come on, you have a smoke machine in here. All right, look. I'm going to tell you a thing, and it's going to make you very sad, but I need you to hold on and stay with me for this, okay? Because I promise it isn't going to stay here, but and I'm not trying to go down into where Bill was, but he'll get this. And I'm not the only widow in the room, and they'll get this. You need to understand that you do die when they do. You can live without a hand, you can live without a foot, you can live without an arm, but you can't live cut in half. And that's what happens. And you have to understand that you walk and you talk and you move around and you get dressed and you go to work and everybody treats you like you're still alive, but you're a ghost. Because you are. You cannot survive being cut in half. And that's what happens. And who you were is gone forever. And people mourn you and they don't even realize that they are mourning you, because you hear them say things like, I miss the way you were before he died. I miss the way you were before. I miss the way you used to be happy. I miss the way that you used to talk. I miss, didn't that used to be your favorite food? Why don't you ever wear that dress anymore? Why don't you ever wear those earrings anymore? Because I'm not who you think I am. You keep thinking that I'm Liz, but she died with Micah.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you. And why we asked and talk about that is, we know not everybody in the room is a widow, but probably many of you know one, and you found yourself having those thoughts about that person, and so that's why it's important to have this conversation. Is not only for those who are mourning the loss, but those who are around them and wanting to say something to help or wanting to support. And these are really important conversations to have and things to talk about so that we can know better some things not to say. So thank you so much, Liz, for being willing to talk about that. I know that's hard to talk about.
Now look, I did start that off with, okay, but I'm not going to leave it on the sad note. So I'm trying to remember. I think you had a follow-up question to that. That was...
Yes. How is the Liz that's here today different from the Liz before Micah died?
Okay, so this is the part where we get to, it's not as sad, and I won't leave you just in ashes, okay? Yes, you're gone, all right? And it's hard. But I want you to imagine, when you're born, when you start developing, you have a blank slate. And I desperately want to go down the clinical rabbit hole with this right now, and I won't. But when you're born, when you're developing, you have this blank slate. And you say all the time, what if I knew the things that I knew then? Now I know now that if I knew them then. And so what would happen if you had a blank slate and you did know a whole bunch of the things that you used to know, and you were more cognizant of a whole bunch of things that you used to know? I'm not suggesting that it's worth it. But it is what happens. Here you are still walking around, you are still moving around, you have to become someone, and so you kind of do. I want you, the best thing, I gave you this example the other night when we were talking. Picture yourself like a garden, okay? And when it happens, your garden turns to ash. But it doesn't stay empty. We know in the clinical world, we used to have this idea that grief would get smaller over time, and we now realize that that's totally a fallacy. I will be a widow forever. That is an immovable part of my identity. But what we do know is that the individual grows around that grief. So if you picture the individual like a garden, okay? And look, I got 8 years invested in this. So my garden has grown. There are new plants. There are new flowers. There are new flower beds. And like I told you the other day, the plants that I have grown since the emptiness are some of the most beautiful plants ever that I've ever known. What you grow from this can be stunning. And so I have an empathy that I didn't have before. I have a patience that I didn't have before. I have a faith that I didn't have before. And I'm not suggesting that you volunteer paying this price for it, but God doesn't waste things. And what has grown since then is awesome. It's good. And Micah has a place in it.
That's great. That's, well, is there a scripture passage, a go-to, something that fits in this discussion, or that just was a help or research to you? Or
Yes.
share it with us.
I could have done this on my phone, but screw you, Scotty. Why do you carry a paper
She didn't tell me
Bible?
she was going to say that. So,
Why do you carry a paper Bible, Liz? You can look it up on your phone. I'm Scotty, and I like technical things. I love you, man.
I know you do.
So I'm going to give you the one that I clung to. This is the scripture that I used a lot right afterwards. And then I'm going to give you the one that I found later that made a lot of sense. These are very thin pages. Okay. So Psalm 146 is not the one I'm looking for. Psalm 147 is the one that I'm looking for. So in Psalm 147, the third verse says, He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. That is accurate. He does heal the brokenhearted and he does bind up their wounds. And I was brokenhearted and he bound up my wounds. And for the record, I do need you to know how present and constant he was. And I do need you to know that I didn't grieve alone, that God grieved with me. And in that brokenness and him sharing that brokenness, he healed me slowly and gradually and healthily. And the other thing that he did, I talked a big game, but I didn't think to put bookmarks in here.
That's why I use digital.
Quiet you. It'd be easier if I had two hands. I literally looked it up in here this morning and went, okay, yeah, there it is. La la la. Dang it, Scotty, where's your phone?
I don't have it.
There it is.
You got it? Okay. She got it.
I got it. Emily, you're so on top of things. She's so organized. Like, you got so lucky. So, all right. So, in Ezekiel, he's talking to Israel. It's interesting because he's talking to Israel in the psalm that I'm referencing to. So in Ezekiel 36, he's talking to Israel and he's talking about, and it's actually really fitting because, of course, he's talking once again about, all right, Israel, everything's broken, everything's a mess. You've just, once again, I gave you nice things. This is why you can't have nice things. And so in Ezekiel, in 36:26, he says, I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit within you. I will take the heart of stone out of you and give you a heart of flesh. That is the most illustrative scripture I can think of. Yes, that death leaves your heart in stone. It leaves it empty. And not that you don't love, it's just there's nothing going into it. And recovery from it does require God to give you a new heart. And he will. It's painful and arduous, but he will and does.
Awesome. So we got just a couple of minutes left, and I just wanted to ask you what advice would you give someone who's, in this phase of trying to move on, whatever you want to call it, better language for those of us who don't understand.
It's all right. I won't deliberately misinterpret you.
What would you say to them if maybe they're coming out of the messy, middle, confusing part of it and looking on the horizon maybe for that new?
You're talking about people who have, like people who are grieving? Like what advice do I
Yes.
give to people who are
Yes.
grieving? Find others who get it. Find the other ones who know the secret handshake. You can rest around them. Don't spend time arguing with people who want to tell you very stupid things in the interest of making themselves and everybody else feel better. And rest. Give yourself time to rest. Give yourself time to grow. Give yourself time. There is hope. There is, and it's a new hope. It's not a hope that you can imagine in your head. It's not a hope that you can come up with a broken heart. It's not a hope that you can create. There is a hope that goes beyond understanding. There is a peace that goes beyond understanding. There is a new path. And he will pave it. And you can get to it. But it takes time, and take all the time you would like. That would be.
Yeah, so you guys have heard me reference my friend recently who, when I was in that time of angst and over some hurtful, some painful loss that I was dealing with and going through. Grief. I don't like to use the word, but that's why
I give you
love Liz.
permission.
So she's the friend I referenced that when I when I get in those moments, Liz is usually the first person I call, and she said it's usually like, well dude, like, how long does grief take? And it's like, however long it takes, and in some degree, it is forever. But it's not always the same. It changes, and
I know it's a strange thing to say, but like you have to understand, grief is not your enemy. In time, grief becomes a friend and a constant companion, and grief is not the thing that you are fighting.